Albert Breer, when you look at this Lions organization, you hear when you're at training camp people chanting Jared Goff's name on the second day of August. What do you make of the transformation over the last few years?
Yeah, well, it's hard to believe that the guy was was considered like a salary dump. You know what I mean? Like in the Matthew Stafford trade. So it's just unbelievable. I mean, that's the only word that pops into my head when I think of where this is versus where it was when Dan and Brad got here, and that this is year 4, and they've already gotten to that point where they're sort of an established power, and a lot of the things that people poke fun at or laughed at worked, and the identity. And I think what's so impressive about it is they told you what it was going to be in 2021, and then it became exactly that, and I think that is so impressive. The ethos of the team, how guys like Jared Goff were such a huge part of that, what he'd been through and how that became a part of who they are, and then, obviously drafting the right guys, and the amount of young players they have on the team now that's ascending, that added to the core that was in place, again, like the Taylor Deckers, the Frank Ragnows, the guys that were here, who Aiden Hutchinson is as a player, who Aleem McNeil is as a player, Brian Branch, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, you can keep going down the list, and it's just they've gotten so many things right over the last few years, and it really shows on the field.
It's a copycat league. So many people try to mimic what winning teams do, and maybe it goes up to ownership almost sometimes to try to hire those people. It's taken a while for it to hit here. Have you seen or heard in your conversations over the last couple of years people trying to replicate any parts of what they're doing here?
I've seen it on my training camp trip. This is my 11th stop, and I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a real push, sports science, with the athletic training, how they're handling athletes, how careful they are with athletes, and how much of it's been, like, let's get to the season. This year, one of the most noticeable things in my training camp trip is how that swung back around, and how now you're seeing more 2.5-hour practices, and you're seeing more contact, and you're seeing more intensity, and you're seeing more coaches that are focused on callousing their teams. And I think a big part of that is who's winning, which is always what it is, which you said, like copycat league, is always what it is. Look at the 4 teams that were there at the end of January. Kansas City, San Francisco, Baltimore, Detroit. And all 4 of those teams and all 4 of those coaches, 2.5-hour practices, contact in camp, like at the points where they're bringing people to the ground in camp. I think that part of it's really interesting. And I was with Sean Payton and the Broncos a couple days ago, and they had mentioned, like, the year before they got there, they led the league in time lost to injury. In 2022, Denver did. And then last year, Sean Payton came in, and Sean Payton's Dan Campbell's old boss. Right. There's a lot of Bill Parcells to the way he does it. I was at a practice the other day, 2.5 hours, gassers at the end. And they were healthier than they'd been in a long time last year. And I think part of it is, like, you might lose a few guys during camp because you're practicing this way, but it winds up benefiting you in the long run. So, there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that I think is being picked up on across the league. And it's not just them. Again, San Francisco plays this way, Baltimore plays this way. But, certainly I think that stuff that we were, everybody's making fun of them for the up downs, 2 or 3 years ago, no one's laughing anymore.
Can you peel back the curtain a little bit of how you do cover this team and the relationships you have? I'm not trying to get inside your mind completely here, because what you do, you've built up. But on a national level, when you do come cover this team, how will you take back as you go to different camps? Oh man, Detroit does things a little bit unique going into the season. You've been here for 5 minutes, but what will be your takeaways? What kind of conversations do you plan with these guys?
Yeah, it's fun getting to see what I see, but for me, it's more about what I hear. And that's just, the relationships that I built up over the years, and, getting to know guys when they're young, getting to know the area scout, getting to know the position coach, and, building a trust with them. So by the time, they're the guys in charge, I'm able to, have real conversations with them. So, I think, you look at this group, and it's been fun to watch them come together and grow up. And I think that there are definitely a couple of head coaches on this staff, and Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, and some guys in Brad Holmes' personnel department that are going to be GMs. We see, Lance Newmark's a good example of a guy who now has gone on and is assistant GM in Washington. It'll make it more challenging for the Lions going forward, but that's what you're talking about when you're talking about replicating something. Is they pluck your people away, and then those people are going to do things the way that you did them here, right? So, yeah, I mean, like for me, it's like being able to kind of tell the real story of what's happening at these places, about the relationships you build, and having real relationships with the people that you cover.
Last one for you. I know when you go on with Rich Eisen, there's a lot of Michigan-Ohio State banter.
Yeah.
But can you at least...
I'll just have everybody know that I've got a ton of roots here in Detroit, and I'm sort of the black sheep in my family. I have a lot of Michigan State people in my family. I'm the only Ohio State person. So, yeah, we have a lot of back and forth, me and Rich. But I've had a lot of practice with the people in my family on that, too.
So you can at least understand the upbringing of being in this Lions environment, and to just know the long-suffering fan base.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see what they've captured in the last couple of years, what would a Super Bowl win mean to this fan base? I know that's such a broad, big question.
I mean,
you
gotta understand. Like I grew up in Massachusetts, but I grew up learning about Gordie Howe and Al Kaline, and like it's funny because you hear about the Tigers and the Red Wings, and I mean, the Pistons were really good when I was a kid. Like I was a little kid when the Bad Boys, all that was going on. And the only thing I'd hear about the Lions was like what it was like when my dad was really young. And my dad's 70, I don't want to put it out there, Dad, I think 75 years old now. Bobby Lane was the quarterback when he was a little kid. And they won championships when he was, 6, 7 years old. But my dad loved football, played football. That was his sport the same way it was my sport. And, one thing I remember him always saying about the Lions was that the fan base is there. It needs to be awakened. And then, I can remember in '92 when they made it to the championship game, and how it kind of came alive a little bit, like with, Wayne Fonts and that group. And, it was so cool for me to see, even though I didn't grow up here, it was so cool for me to see what happened in that stadium in January. And I mean, you got a taste of what it would be like if they won a championship, with what that was like. And I had cousins and uncles in the stadium for that. Like, and
my ears are still ringing.
And I watched that. You watch it on TV, and you're like, holy crap! And it was amazing to see. And I kind of had an idea. I wasn't in the stadium for those games, but I've seen it in bits and pieces what it's been like here. And like the one I always tell people about being here, and like my roots here and what it can be like here was I was at the handshake game, the Harbaugh-Schwartz handshake game. And I remember that was the Lions were coming off that big breakthrough year in 10 with Schwartz. So there was a lot of excitement about Stafford and everything else. And I believe that game went to overtime, maybe, or it came right down to the end and a goal line stand. And I said to somebody, I was on the field, I was on like the 10-yard line for the end of that game, and I was like, it sounded like a plane was taking off, how loud it was in that stadium. And so the environment, in that stadium can be off the charts when they're really good. And I think it's just a little taste of what it would be like if they're the last one standing in February.
We'll see you for a few playoff games this year.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Appreciate the time, man.